Everyone has heard of the Sultan's harem, a paradise of silk, perfume, and pleasure. But behind those jeweled doors, the truth was darker. It wasn't a dream of desire. It was a machine of control. Women were trained, tested, and traded like treasures. Their beauty turned into currency, their silence into survival. Some vanished. A few learned to rule from the shadows. This is not the tale of pleasure they told you. It's the story of captivity disguised as luxury. If you enjoy stories like this, please like and subscribe and tell me, where are you watching from and what time is it right now? Now, let's step inside the Sultan's palace, where obedience was art and pleasure was power. She was 16 when the ship docked in Istanbul, a prisoner hidden behind silk. The guards called her gift, not captive. The palace called her potential. She had been taken from a village that no longer remembered her name, sold through a chain of merchants until she reached the gates of Topkapi, the beating heart of an empire built on faith, fear, and flesh. Inside, everything glittered. Walls of marble, fountains whispering through perfumed air, gold threads woven into every curtain. But luxury had a smell, sweet, heavy, suffocating. The women moved like ghosts in jewels, each step rehearsed, each breath observed. Laughter was a language of survival. They told her she was now part of the Sultan's world, a paradise of pleasure. Yet the first lesson she learned was silence. No one spoke of the past. No one said no. At night she heard music drifting from the upper chambers, followed by screams too soft to be called pain, too real to be called pleasure. And as she lay in the dark, she understood the rule that governed the palace. Here, beauty was a cage, and the key was always in someone else's hand. Her name was erased the first day of training. A new one was given, softer, easier to whisper. The matrons of the harem taught her how to walk, how to smile, how to breathe as if every gesture were a prayer. Obedience was elegance, silence, survival. Each morning began with ritual, baths in rose water, hair brushed until it shone, skin perfumed like an offering. They dressed her in colors chosen to flatter the Sultan's mood, pale blue for calm, crimson for passion. Even the tilt of her head was rehearsed. She was sculpted into perfection, not for herself, but for a glance she might never receive. They called it education. It was conditioning, to sing, but never speak. To dance, but never step out of line, to smile when chosen and disappear when ignored. Some girls cried at night, whispering prayers in languages no one else understood. Others hardened into silence, their eyes blank as polished marble, and through it all, the same words echoed like a spell. To serve is to survive. By the end of the month, the girl had become an illusion, beautiful, disciplined, and empty enough to be desired. When the Sultan entered the harem, time itself seemed to hold its breath. Every curtain stilled, every woman knelt. The scent of jasmine mixed with fear. Tonight was the night of selection, the moment every concubine was trained to anticipate, yet secretly dreaded. The eunuchs announced his arrival with a single chime. Behind the screens, girls trembled like instruments waiting to be played. The Sultan walked slowly, inspecting faces as if reading a secret language only he understood. To meet his gaze was an honor. To hold it too long was danger. When he stopped before her, the room vanished. His hand lifted her chin, eyes unreadable. She felt the weight of 1,000 rehearsed gestures collapse into instinct. Not desire, but calculation. That night she was taken to the private chambers, gold lamps, soft cushions, a bed that smelled of power and perfume. The servants undressed her in silence, their faces blank. She had imagined fear. What she felt was surrender, not of body, but of self. In the Empire's stories, this was pleasure, but in truth, it was initiation. The night the Sultan's touch turned her from person to property. Morning revealed the true order of the harem. The girl who had shared the Sultan Ayas' bed now stood above the rest for a moment. Servants bowed lower, whispers followed her steps, and rivals smiled with poison in their eyes. In this world, favor was power, and power had no memory. The palace called it harmony. The women called it survival. Each concubine belonged to a rank: novices, favorites, mothers. The higher one rose, the sharper the knives beneath the silk. Alliances were made over tea, broken before dusk. A compliment could hide a curse. A gift could hide poison. No woman trusted another. Every gaze measured value. The Sultan's affection was the empire's most volatile currency, and he spent it carelessly. At night, music floated through the corridors again, but now she understood its rhythm. Every note was a performance, every sigh rehearsed. Desire wasn't emotion, it was theater staged for one man's boredom. She began to see what others refused to admit. Inside the Sultan's palace, love was a rumor, pleasure a disguise, and the true competition wasn't for his heart. It was for tomorrow's safety. Among the sea of silks and painted smiles, one woman broke the pattern. Her name was Roxalana, once a captive from the western plains, now a whisper that carried through the harem like prophecy. She laughed when others bowed, spoke when silence was expected, and somehow turned defiance into charm. The Sultan should have punished her. Instead, he summoned her again. She did not tremble before him. Where others sought affection, she offered conversation. Where others obeyed, she reasoned. Soon he was asking for her counsel as often as her company. The concubines watched in disbelief as she was granted chambers of her own, jewels reserved for queens, and something rarer than gold: his attention. Roxalana understood what none of them dared to see. The harem wasn't only a prison, it was a court, and every glance was politics. She traded sweetness for strategy, desire for dialogue, and turned intimacy into influence. When the Sultan married her, a scandal without precedent, the empire gasped. For the first time, a slave had become empress. The others saw romance. Roxalana saw opportunity. And the walls of the harem, once her cage, became her throne. Roxalana's reign inside the palace rewrote every rule. She understood the Sultan's greatest weakness wasn't lust. It was loneliness. So she made herself indispensable not just to his body but to his mind. She read his moods before he spoke, softened his rage with a word, and used affection like a blade hidden in silk. Soon, nothing in the harem happened without her approval. The women who once competed for his attention now competed for hers. A smile from Roxalana meant protection. A frown meant exile. She controlled the Sultan's schedule, the gifts, the letters sent to foreign courts. Even the eunuchs began to bow lower when she passed. Pleasure had become policy. Every night she spent beside the Sultan was an act of governance, and each morning she rose closer to absolute power. Yet she never forgot what the harem had taught her. Beauty fades, fear endures. She ruled with both. Outside the palace, the empire called her witch, temptress, corrupter of the throne. Inside, no one dared speak without her consent. Roxalana had mastered the game and turned the Sultan's desire into the empire's new law. Power draws envy like perfume draws flies. Roxalana's rise left shadows in its wake, and one of them belonged to Mahidevran, the Sultan's former favorite. Once adored, now forgotten, she watched her influence vanish while Roxalana's laughter echoed through corridors that used to be hers. Whispers turned to venom. Servants carried messages between the women, polite on the surface, sharp beneath. Mahidevran struck first, summoning Roxalana with false civility. The meeting ended in blood. No one knows exactly what happened, but the stories agree on one thing. The favorite S hand left a scar across Roxalana's face. That mark became legend. Instead of hiding it, she wore it like proof. The Sultan's anger was swift. Mahidevran was stripped of her jewels, her chambers, her title, sent away to rot in silence. The lesson spread faster than rumor. In this palace, defying Roxalana was treason. From that day, the harem changed forever. The laughter grew quieter, the glances shorter. Everyone understood that behind the curtains of gold, a single woman ruled by fear, wit, and patience, and that every drop of her power had been bought in flesh. Roxalana had everything the empire could offer: jewels, servants, and the Sultan's devotion. Yet the higher she climbed, the smaller her world became. Beyond the velvet walls, she was still a captive. She could command armies with a whisper, but she could not walk through the city gates. Every sound in the palace became surveillance: footsteps behind doors, whispers after laughter. Her throne was scented with rosewater and fear. She slept on silk sheets, but woke every night to the same thought: I am still owned. The Sultan's love had made her powerful, but it had also made her visible. And visibility, in that empire, was the most dangerous form of exposure. She began to build alliances in secret: loyal eunuchs, clever scribes, spies disguised as servants. If freedom couldn't be granted, it would have to be negotiated. Still, she never let the mask slip. By day, she smiled for portraits and prayers. By night, she counted enemies in silence. The world imagined her drunk on luxury. But Roxalana knew the truth. Even a queen in the Sultan's harem was still just another prisoner, one with better jewelry. Long after Roxalana's death, her shadow still ruled the palace. The Sultan's wives, mothers, and favorites studied her like scripture. What she had built, the art of ruling through affection, became the empire's new religion. Behind the throne now stood a hidden council of women who spoke through pillows, gifts, and secrets whispered at dawn. Historians would later call it the Sultanate of Women, but inside the palace, it was simply survival perfected. A look from the Sultan's mother could replace a vizier. A well-timed rumor could spark a war. The empire's laws were written in ink. Its fate was written in perfume. No man admitted it, but everyone knew. The harem had become the quiet heart of power. Decisions once made in war rooms were now born in bedrooms. And through it all, the same paradox remained. The world worshipped these women's beauty, but feared their influence. They ruled behind curtains, crowned in silence, their victories never sung. The palace had become an empire of whispers. And for every sultan who reigned in daylight, there was always a woman guiding his hand in the dark. Centuries later, the West would retell their story and twist it beyond recognition. Pain became fantasy. The harem, once a cage, turned into an exotic dream for painters and travelers who never crossed its gates. They called it a paradise of desire, a playground for kings, and the women inside? Lucky. But luck had nothing to do with it. Those women were bought, trained, displayed, and discarded. Their silence was mistaken for mystery, their suffering for seduction. The truth that the Sultan's palace ran on fear and flesh was buried under silk and myth. Yet something of their power endured. The harem's ghosts still haunt history's imagination, their stories leaking through poems, letters, and forbidden songs. They remind us that beauty can be armor, that submission can hide strategy, and that pleasure has always been the most elegant disguise for control. So when you picture the Sultan surrounded by his prisoners of pleasure, remember this: the women behind those curtains were not props in his fantasy. They were survivors in his empire. And sometimes the quietest prisoner is the one who learns to rule without ever standing from her knees. The Sultan's palace still stands, marble, silent, gleaming, but its walls remember. They remember the cries swallowed by music, the perfume that masked fear, the women who smiled because they had no other weapon. History painted them as ornaments in a man's paradise. In truth, they were architects of survival, building power out of captivity and turning obedience into strategy. Every glance, every gesture, every whisper was a negotiation with fate. What happened inside the harem wasn't a story of love or lust. It was a story of endurance. Beneath the silks and jewels, these women mastered the oldest art of all, staying alive in a world that mistook their silence for consent. And long after the empire crumbled, one truth remained. The Sultan ruled an empire of men, but inside his palace, the women ruled him. That was the real secret of pleasure. It was never his to begin with.